Oh, we can't see your head in the video. I mean, you gotta be in the video. Oh, here we go. We're all in. Including the cat. We got the cat in here too. So hi guys. So today I was going to share a very special story, more in depth. It's going to be more focused on my experience being life-flighted at 32 and a half weeks pregnant with her, and what that experience was like. We became pregnant with Aubrey on the first try, so we got pregnant right away with her. That's so cool. Baby number 3. So excited. She had picked out the name Aubrey Lillian, I'd say about 2 months before we started trying. Me, my husband, and my sister were all sitting around and we were just throwing around some girl names and some boy names, just in case we decided to pick out a boy name. If it was going to be a boy, it would have been Logan. So we've been tossing around some names, but we were all very certain that it was going to be an Aubrey Lillian.
So many things before. Always wanted to.
Little girl.
Girl? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, he's right. Third one's a charm for him. Yep, babe, it's an Aubrey.
Getting close to the 32 and a half weeks when I really started to have a lot of problems in the pregnancy. I was just experiencing a lot of just a general tight stomach. I didn't think it was Braxton Hicks because it was all over my stomach. It was constantly tight. Nothing would really relieve it. Laying on my side kind of helped, but if I was sitting down, laying back, it was just a constant dull ache. It was very uncomfortable. It was very hard to pick up my other 2 kids or do anything at all. Ethan. Who's this? Ethan. Who's this? Yeah?
Oh, Bonnie.
Really?
Bonnie.
2 kids came home from school, from daycare, with a stomach bug. I didn't get that stomach bug until a couple days later, but then I got it. It was 12 hours of throwing up. I definitely felt very dehydrated, but I didn't think it was a big deal because I've gotten sick before. I've had the flu, I've had stomach bugs while I've been pregnant, and it wasn't a big deal. And by the evening, my legs had started to really cramp. I didn't think I was severely dehydrated, but my legs were really cramping up. And so I was like, okay, well, I better go to the hospital. I better go check this out, maybe get some IV fluids, and I'll come back home. I get to the hospital, and this is when all the fun really starts to begin with the pregnancy. My heart rate and her heart rate were both really high up. And so they wanted to get our hearts to go back to normal rhythm, and they wanted to rehydrate us. She started to notice that I was having consistent contractions, and I was so nauseous and cramping in my legs that I didn't even notice until I started paying attention after she said something that I was actually having contractions. They were very small, like a tiny menstrual cramp, enough to where I was starting to dilate. So after about, I'd say 30 minutes to maybe an hour of being in the ER, they checked me and they said I went from a 1 to 2 centimeters in an hour. So I was actually progressing, and I was progressing kind of quickly. And so they moved me up to a different room, and they brought in the doctor. And the doctor had checked me again and said I was continuing to progress. The doctor came in and she said, well, she's like, we're gonna try getting you a flight out tonight. And I'm thinking, a flight? Like, what are they talking about? You know, I was like, what's going on? I mean, I thought, you know, give me some medicines, help the contractions stop, and help me from continuing to progress, and I can just go home or something like that. But no, they wanted to send me all the way down to Albuquerque, which from our house, Albuquerque is 4-hour drive away. They weren't giving me an option. They weren't saying like, hey, we can wait until see if you slow down. They're like, no, you gotta go down there right now. We have to make sure that you get down to this hospital before you potentially pop out a baby. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm texting my husband and telling him, hey, I'm contracting, I'm going into labor, and they need to life flight me down to Albuquerque. I just wasn't expecting it. I was expecting to go in there for a couple hours and then go home the next morning. I wasn't expecting that I would be scooped up and sent away to a different town, and then I'd have to leave my other kids. The whole time, even though it was a really scary situation, being scooped up and sent away. For one thing, I wasn't feeling the contractions. I wasn't in full-on labor. It wasn't like painful or scary or anything like that for me. Because the entire time I could feel this little girl kicking and moving inside of me. And even though it was a crazy situation, I really did feel very at peace at the situation. I felt like that she was going to be okay because she was so strong and she felt so healthy. It gave me a lot of peace as I was getting loaded up into the ambulance, as I was getting loaded up into what I call a little puddle jumper, which is the tiny little plane that they put me in. It was just enough to fit me in there. I was feeling okay because I felt like she was going to be just fine no matter what happened. And it was hard to convey that to my husband because he's not feeling her kicking and squirming inside. I'm the one that's feeling this way. I found out an underlying condition that I had early because of this trip. They were running a lot of blood tests and urine tests because of the pre-labor, and they were giving me magnesium to help out with her. She did, and steroids as well, just in case she was born early to help her development and her lungs and her brain. But when I was down in the Albuquerque hospital, they had found out that I had preeclampsia, which is a very serious condition. We spent a total of 10 days down in Albuquerque. They wanted us to stay close to that hospital for that long of time because I needed to reach 34 weeks pregnant before I was able to return home, just in case I went into labor with her early and they needed to take care of a baby that was born before 34 weeks. I had preeclampsia. I wasn't really showing a lot of signs and symptoms, but unfortunately with preeclampsia, it doesn't get better during the pregnancy. It doesn't go away. It only can get worse. And it's kind of like a ticking time bomb. You never know when you can really flare up and when things can become super dangerous for both mother and baby. By the time that I had left the hospital, I had stopped at 3 centimeters dilated and 75% effaced. Oh man, was it uncomfortable. So not only after I had left the hospital and went to the hotel that was very close to the hospital, just in case I went in labor while I was staying down there, I was getting off of the magnesium that they had given me to make sure that her lungs would have developed enough, so I was very loopy from that. And then also every time I would stand up from all the way from the 32 and a half weeks that I got into preterm labor all the way until 37 weeks when I had my C-section, I felt like I was going into, felt like I kept going into labor. She would shift down into my pelvic area, and she was already all the way into that area. She was like at a -1, so she was pretty far engaged with my pelvic bone. So it was very uncomfortable. I felt like I was going into labor without going into labor every time I would stand up. So I was definitely on bed rest, strict bed rest. My husband went back to get some stuff for us at the hotel. Definitely a pregnancy pillow and some clothes because I was just whisked away. So I didn't even have a phone charger with me. I had nothing with me. So he had to go back after he made sure that me and the baby were okay and grab a bunch of our stuff. My sister and my mom both, for those 10 days that I was gone, took care of the kids for us.
Hi, Mama.
Hey, Mom.
Love you.
I love you.
And that same lovely stomach bug that started this whole fiasco, they also picked it up from the house too. So they were sick while taking care of 2 toddlers. So my brain was in a fog, and it was very, very hard to concentrate because of all the pressure of her moving down into my pelvic area. I felt like my head was like being squeezed. So even doing artwork was very difficult to do as well. So it was hard to do anything. It was hard to get rest because I was so uncomfortable. My heartburn ever since the hospital and the preeclampsia just like took off all of a sudden. So like trying to lay down and take naps was uncomfortable, and lasted all the way until I gave birth at 37 weeks. They had to constantly monitor and check her, and every single checkup that she had, she was perfectly fine. She was continuing to gain weight. She was continuing to grow right where they wanted her to do. She was kicking and moving around. She was doing awesome the other time, which was great. It was just me that was having all the fun and experiencing. So it gave me a lot of comfort that, okay, I just have to deal with this uncomfortable, painful pregnancy for another couple weeks. Having preeclampsia just felt like a ticking time bomb. I didn't know when I would progress with the preeclampsia and it would become worse, or I'd become eclampsia and start having seizures, and that could just happen like that. So I basically just tried to concentrate on taking care of my other kids and tried to concentrate on work. Definitely a lot of, after we got home at 34 weeks, there was definitely a lot of trips to the hospital. There was a couple times when I started having contractions again, but the contractions weren't causing me to dilate or to efface anymore. I stayed the same, but there's definitely contractions. So on April 20th is when we scheduled the C-section, and it was supposed to be at 9 o'clock in the morning. They're like 5, it felt like 5 hours early. We left the house at 4:30 in the morning. I have had 2 other C-sections with comfortable with the process. You get in there, they check your vitals, they make sure you don't have a fever, they make sure everything's all good. They start to give you fluids, and then you just hang out while they get the OR prepped and everything like that. So I wasn't really nervous about the C-section. I wasn't really nervous about the other C-sections, except for I did get a spinal migraine with the other 2 C-sections, and spinal migraines are very, very, very intense and very debilitating. They're very rough. So I was really hoping that I would not get one of those again. Well, her C-section went a lot better than the other 2 did. Even though they numb you from the waist down so that you don't feel them cutting into you. The other 2, I did feel a lot of extra pressure with her. They did have to kind of like push her out, help her get her out, and I felt that, but it wasn't like as painful as I remember it being with my son's C-section. And then I've always had troubles when they put the actual spinal in to my back. Apparently I have a very thick spine, and so it takes a lot of poking, and so just like bending over this baby bump, trying to like curl up so I can open up my spine, was always just a really uncomfortable, annoying, and kind of scary thing to go through with all the C-sections. I think out of everything, when they have to put that in, if you have ever gotten an epidural or a spinal, you know what I'm talking about when they had to put that little needle. But they had to poke me like 4 or 5 times, so it's not the funnest process. Giving me the spinal, they lay my arms out to the side, and then they kind of lay open my legs, and they have to start prepping my body for the C-section. So by the time that they let my husband in, they were like already had cut me open and were already trying to get Aubrey out of there. I never saw that. They always put a drape in front of them. I kind of wish I would be able to see that. I'm not really squeamish or anything, and I would totally have watched them do my C-sections with all 3 of them. That's actually really fascinating to me, but I wasn't really worried about her because she just was so full of life, so full of energy. She was the one baby out of all 3 of them that moved the most, constantly moving, and there was never a second that I was wondering, hey, is Aubrey okay? Because I could constantly feel her moving in there, and she had such good, strong kicks. Someone's excited to come out tomorrow. And the same thing was during the C-section, because the doctor told me that she actually kind of had to chase after Aubrey to pull her out because she was just full of life and kicking. And it was funny because when they actually finally pulled her out, they lowered the drape so I could see her, but the doctor said, she's like, wow, I was not expecting that big of a baby to come out, because my bump was always kind of small with her. It was small with the other ones, but I'm a tall woman. I'm 5'8", so I guess I just have more space in there for a taller baby. But they did not think that they were going to pull out such a big baby at 37 weeks for how small my bump was. But she was exactly 6 pounds and 1 ounce, and for coming out at 37 weeks, that was right on target. She definitely was smaller than her siblings, but they did have an extra 2.5 weeks of growing inside the womb than she did. And those last 2 to 3 weeks are extremely important for a baby's growth. They'll pack on the pounds. They'll pack on another 2 pounds, 3 pounds. So she came out to be 6 pounds, 1 ounce. Her siblings both came out at 7 pounds, 12 ounces. It was funny because all the clothes that I got was 0 to 3 months, and it was all kind of loose on her because I was definitely not expecting when we bought clothes to have such a small baby. She was the healthiest out of all my babies. She did not have one single issue on her end coming out. My other 2 did have a little bit with the belly ribbon. They had some jaundice when they first came out, so they had to keep them a little bit longer at the hospital, just like a day, so it wasn't that much longer. I got to leave after 1 day of having her. Didn't get the spinal migraine. And C-sections in general, they're a major surgery. They can be extremely painful, especially after the spinal is worn off and your body starts to really get used to actually having quite a bit of a cut on your stomach and a little life being pulled out of you. Initially, the first couple days can be really uncomfortable, but I was able to manage the pain after having her a lot better than I did with the other kids. I was able to figure out what kind of medications worked out for me the best. Really recovered from her C-section really quickly. She followed suit with her siblings. She started to sleep through the night, the 6 to 7 hours, starting at 6 weeks, like her brother and her sister did. So as far as eating goes and sleeping through the night, she did really awesome like they did. I'm dealing for over a year some long-term complications from just birth in general. I'm still dealing with anemia and general fatigue. So we getting tired. Your siblings are gonna be home. Because one person did ask, like, emotionally, like, how did I do then and afterwards? You know, I felt like I did really good. It's been difficult dealing with the anemia, but I had been through so much with her that I was just so grateful to have her in my life, especially after that whole experience. And then also, I've been through it a couple of times with other kids, so I was definitely used to it. And there's the minions! This is a great ending to the video, is when the minions came home. Hi! You did?